They say, if you truly love someone, you should always be there for them. Cute. Also, spiritually devastating. Because what happens when you're always there? You become invisible, predictable, a living, breathing help desk with no lunch break. Welcome to Buddhist Wisdom for the Elderly, where we gently peel back the polite lies society taught you and hand you back your peace, wrapped in silence and a slightly judgmental smile. In today's video, we're tackling one of the most harmful myths baked into elder life, that your worth is measured by your emotional availability. Spoiler alert, it's not. It never was. Each part of this video will guide you through the trap, the phrase or belief, why it secretly hurts you, a real story or example to bring it to life, and what to do instead, usually involving silence, boundaries, or disappearing beautifully. Make sure you stay until part 4, where we reveal what really happens when you withdraw from manipulators and why their panic is proof of your power. Yes, your emotional silence might actually ruin someone's day. That's how you know you're healing. If you enjoy spiritual rebellion wrapped in dry humor, like and subscribe. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers and keep creating more mind-clearing, guilt-slaying content for wise souls like you. Take a deep breath. You're not selfish. You're finally remembering you exist. Let's begin. Part 1. The myth of constant availability. Why you're always tired but still smiling. Let's get something straight. Being available 24/7 isn't love, it's customer service. And guess what? You're not a call center. You're a human soul with knees that creak and a spirit that, honestly, just wants some damn peace. But somewhere between your first gray hair and your last grandkid's birthday, you were sold a myth. A sweet, dangerous little lie. That the more available you are, the more lovable you become. Answer quickly. Smile often. Say yes when you want to scream. Keep everyone happy, even if it makes your left eye twitch uncontrollably. Because heaven forbid someone calls you difficult at 72. And so you keep showing up. You answer texts while cooking dinner with arthritic hands. You watch the grandkids when your own back feels like it's been rebuilt with spare IKEA parts. You nod through conversations you stopped caring about 3 decades ago. And what do you get in return? A vague sense of being loved, and a very specific kind of exhaustion that even naps can't fix. Let's talk about that exhaustion, shall we? It's not physical. Not entirely. You could drink 3 espressos and still feel like a dried-out sponge in a room full of spills. That's soul fatigue. Because you're not just tired. You're overexposed, emotionally sunburned from too much yes and not enough hell no. Buddhist psychology would say this: when you try to be everything for everyone, you end up being nothing to yourself. And here's the thing, elderly folks, we're the worst offenders. Not because we're weak, but because we're wise enough to know time is short and sentimental enough to keep giving it away like Halloween candy. We don't want to be forgotten. We don't want to be a burden. And, let's be real, we're a little afraid of being left behind. So we say yes to favors, to phone calls, to dinner with people who chew too loud and talk too much. But underneath that yes is a quiet, trembling, please see me. And underneath that is a tired voice whispering, I just want to be left alone for a day or a decade. Here's where it gets cruel. The more available you are, the less you're respected. You become predictable. A background app in everyone's life, silently updating without thanks. They stop knocking, they just walk in, and you smile. Because that's what you've always done. But inside, you're a locked door no one realizes they've never truly opened. Let me tell you something sacred. There's no spiritual trophy for being endlessly reachable. You won't float into the afterlife with bonus karma points for replying to that 9 p.m. guilt trip text from your cousin Barbara. You are not a moral vending machine. You are not eternal sunshine in orthopedic shoes. You are allowed, yes, even at your age, to want your time back. To protect your peace like it's a family heirloom. to sit in stillness without explaining yourself to anyone who didn't bother to ask how your day was before asking for a favor. So the next time someone says, "You've changed," smile kindly and reply, "No, I just finally logged out." Part 2. Psychic Vampires and Why They Hate When You Don't Text Back. Let's talk about vampires. Not the sparkly ones, not the cape-wearing, neck-biting ones. I'm talking about psychic vampires. The people who drain your energy through perfectly legal, socially acceptable emotional dependence. These aren't bad people. Most of them wouldn't know they're doing it. But boy, do they know where your on button is. And they will keep pressing it as long as you keep lighting up. You know the type. That friend who only calls when their life is burning down, but never stays to hear about yours. The adult child who remembers you exist only when rent is due or relationships crash. The neighbor who swings by just to talk and somehow leaves you wondering if a truck ran over your spirit. Now here's the kicker. These people don't miss you when you stop responding. They miss access to you. They miss the function you served. You were their therapist, their audience, their reassurance machine. And then one day, you just stop replying. And suddenly, they're offended. You've changed. You're distant. Are you okay? Yes, you're fine. You're just no longer handing out free emotional smoothies to everyone who walks past your porch. Buddhist insight teaches that suffering is often born from attachment. But no one talks about the flip side. What about when others are attached to you? Not as a person, but as a service. You see, most of us older souls have soft boundaries. We're trained to be generous, helpful, kind, to never make anyone feel rejected. But here's the thing. There's a difference between kindness and self-erasure, between generosity and spiritual bankruptcy. And if you've ever sat in silence after a long conversation that left you hollow, you know what I mean. It's the feeling of being used, but in a very polite way. Like your soul got drained through a reusable straw. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you're a beautiful ancient well. People come with buckets. They take and take. Some say thank you. Most don't. And after a while, your water starts to dry up. Now here's the twist. They don't bring water to you. They bring expectations, thirst, entitlement. But they never ask, "Hey, how are you?" That's the psychic vampire. Not a monster. Just someone thirsty enough to pretend you're infinite. And when you finally start saying, "Not today," they'll gasp. They'll protest. They'll say things like, "But I thought you cared." You do care. You just also care about not dying emotionally in the process. Elderly psychology tells us this. As we age, we crave fewer people and deeper peace. Not because we're becoming antisocial, but because we finally learned the difference between being needed and being loved. So the next time someone gets irritated because you didn't answer their third call, don't panic. You didn't fail them. They just got a taste of what it's like to sit in their own discomfort without you absorbing it. And honestly, that's not betrayal. That's liberation. Part 3. The Sacred Power of Not Giving a Response. Why Silence is the New Sword. Let's get something deliciously uncomfortable out of the way. You don't owe anybody a reaction. Not a reply. Not an explanation. Not even a well-timed emoji. Now I know, that feels illegal, especially if you've been trained, like most of us elders, to be polite until death or dementia. But here's the truth you won't hear at Sunday brunch. Silence is a power move. It's not passive. It's not rude. It's not the same thing as ghosting someone out of spite. It's ghosting them out of enlightenment. You see, people think communication is about connection. That's adorable. What it's often about is control. They say something irritating. You react. Now they know they've still got you on the hook. But when you don't react, when you sit in silence like an old stone Buddha on a porch swing, sipping tea and not giving a damn, they lose it. Because your silence does something cruelly beautiful. It forces people to hear their own noise. It breaks their rhythm. It takes the dance floor away, and suddenly they're dancing alone, and the music stopped, and they have no idea what to do themselves without your applause. Now, I'm not talking about silent treatment games. That's still performance. I'm talking about conscious silence, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything, the kind that sits with itself comfortably, like a cat who knows its royalty. From a Buddhist lens, this kind of silence isn't empty, it's full. It's presence without performance, and it says more than your words ever could. Do you know what happens when you stop replying? At first, they'll be confused, then offended. Then, if they're brave, they'll be confronted by themselves. That's the gift. Your silence becomes their mirror. And let me tell you, some folks do not want to see what's in that reflection. Elder wisdom tells us, the more years you live, the fewer arguments are worth having. Why waste breath defending yourself to someone who wasn't listening in the first place? Why spend your precious emotional bandwidth explaining your boundaries like it's a customer return policy? You're not a product. You don't come with a manual. And your peace is not a group project. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, 78 years old, who stopped replying to her family's group text. Not because she was mad, but because she wanted to finish a puzzle in silence. A week later, her daughter called and said, "Are you okay?" She said, "I've never been better." No emojis, no drama, just me, my tea, and a puzzle shaped like a swan. That, my friend, is spiritual sovereignty. You don't owe people your constant availability. You don't owe them the sound of your voice just because they raised theirs. You don't owe them the comfort of your reaction just because they got uncomfortable. So the next time someone pushes your buttons, try this. Don't push back. Don't push anything. Let silence do the work, because sometimes the strongest no is the sound of nothing at all. Part 4. When you withdraw, they panic. The narcissist's worst nightmare. There's a strange thing that happens when you stop picking up the rope. People who were pulling on it suddenly fall flat on their faces. Because here's the dirty secret most folks won't admit. They weren't connected to you. They were connected to the control they had over you. The moment you stop reacting, no tears, no likes, long texts, no dramatic sighs, their whole script falls apart. You just deleted your character from their play, and now they're screaming backstage, "Where's my supporting actor?" And let me tell you, narcissists, oh, they hate that. Because when you were dancing for their approval, jumping to their demands, explaining yourself like a contestant on an emotional game show, they had you. They knew your moves. They could predict your apologies, your justifications, even your panic. But when you withdraw, you become unreadable, unstable, unpredictable. And to people who thrive on control, that's a horror movie. You'd think pulling back would be peaceful. But the first thing you'll hear when you stop being so damn available is, "You're being cold. You've changed. Wow, I guess you're not who I thought you were." No, you're just not who they could use anymore. You're no longer performing the role they wrote for you. And now they don't know what to do, because for the first time, they're not in charge of your reactions. Buddhist psychology would say they've mistaken their attachment for connection. They weren't loving you. They were loving the idea of what you did for them. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Sometimes the people who love you most only love you as long as you're useful. You being endlessly patient, that was useful. You never saying no, also useful. You crying quietly so they didn't feel guilty, extra useful. But the moment you withdraw, you stop texting, you stop rescuing, you don't explain, you don't engage. Suddenly, you're not loving anymore. You're selfish. Funny how that works. Here's a little story. There was a man, 82 years old, who stopped picking up the phone when his son called in crisis. Again, the son left 14 voicemails in 2 days. The last one said, "I can't believe you'd abandon me like this." And the old man? He was sitting on a porch swing, watching a bird build a nest. He whispered, "Son, I'm not abandoning you. I'm just finally coming home to myself." That's the kind of rebellion no one sees coming. Not with fists, not with fury, just with stillness. And you know what scares people the most? That stillness isn't passive. It's powerful. It breaks their mirror. It forces them to look at themselves instead of hiding in the chaos of your reactions. So the next time someone accuses you of changing, smile gently and say, "No, I'm just tired of playing the character you liked." Then hang up, drink your tea, watch the birds, and let the silence do what words never could. Part 5. Your energy is a bank account. Stop handing out emotional loans. Let's talk about your energy like it's money, because, frankly, it is. Every time you say yes when you meant, "Oh, hell no," you just paid an emotional invoice. Every unnecessary explanation? That's a transaction fee. Every phone call that left you emotionally dehydrated? That's a withdrawal from your spiritual savings. Now here's the kicker. You're out here giving out interest-free emotional loans to people who never pay you back. Some of them don't even say thank you. They just assume your energy grows on trees, probably next to your retirement fund and your patience. But let's be honest, your inner economy is in a recession. You're emotionally overdrawn, and you're still swiping your soul like it's unlimited. Listen, you are not the Federal Reserve of calmness. You don't have to keep printing peace for people who panic every time they're mildly inconvenienced. Elder psychology tells us this: as you age, your energy becomes more precious, not less. You don't have the bandwidth to waste on half-hearted conversations and emotional deadbeats. And yet, so many of us, especially those raised on guilt and good manners, keep handing out our attention like candy at a parade no one invited us to. So here's your financial forecast. Start budgeting your peace. Let me break it down like a Buddhist accountant. Mindless small talk with people who drain you? $25 of peace, gone. Explaining yourself to someone who already made up their mind? $100 deduction. Feeling obligated to pick up the phone because it might be rude not to? There goes your rent. You know what spiritual bankruptcy feels like? That moment you sit on the couch after doing nothing all day and still feel exhausted. Not because your body is tired, but because your soul's been working overtime as an unpaid emotional butler. Buddhism teaches us to guard the gates of the senses, and that includes the inbox. It means you don't need to open every emotional request that knocks on your door just because you're technically home. You can be kind and unavailable. You can be generous and have boundaries. You can be loving and let the phone ring endlessly into the eternal void. Let me offer you a tiny story. An older woman once told me she made a rule. Every time she said yes to someone, she had to put $5 in a jar. At the end of the month, she looked at the jar and realized she'd bought everyone else's peace and couldn't afford her own. So she changed the rule. Now, every time she says no to something that drains her, she puts $5 in. She used it to buy herself a massage, a quiet lunch, and eventually a new front doorbell. That doesn't ring. Brilliant. So if you've been handing out overdraft protection to every emotionally needy person in your life, it's time for a correction. You are not a spiritual ATM. You are not here to finance other people's avoidance of their own feelings. Save your energy. Spend it wisely. Invest it in things that make your soul breathe deeper, not shrink smaller. Because when your inner bank is full, you don't need to chase love. You don't need to defend your boundaries. And you certainly don't need to explain why you no longer offer emotional credit to people who never even said thank you. Part 6. Sacred unavailability. You are not a customer service representative. Repeat after me, slowly and with a little mischief. I am not a customer service representative. Not for your family. Not for your friends. Not for your ex-spouse who still thinks they have lifetime tech support access to your emotional operating system. You are not here to troubleshoot other people's drama. You are not on call for existential meltdowns. And you're definitely not handing out free returns on advice they never listened to in the first place. Now I know what you're thinking. but I'm just trying to be helpful. Yes, you were helpful. You were so helpful, they started calling you instead of calling their therapist. You were so emotionally available. People started assuming your spiritual boundaries came with free shipping and weekend availability. Let's sit with something sacred for a moment. Being constantly available isn't generosity. It's spiritual codependency dressed up in politeness. And here's where the Buddhist bell rings. To let go of attachment is also to let go of the need to be needed. That one stings a little, doesn't it? Because a lot of us, especially those of us with silver hair and a lifetime of people-pleasing under our belts, mistake being needed for being valued. But that's a trap. You are not a 24-hour gas station for the emotionally stranded. You are not Google. You are not Alexa with a heart. You are a sacred being with a nervous system that deserves rest. And a calendar that, guess what, doesn't have to be open to just one quick favor. Let me tell you about Martha. Martha is 76. One day she decided to put a sign on her door that said, "If it's not love, laughter, or lemon cake, please come back tomorrow." And just like that, the neighborhood's emotional freeloaders vanished. Poof. Gone. They didn't want her. They wanted her listening ears, her coffee, her comfort. But when she stopped offering the full-service empathy package, they took their troubles and their neediness elsewhere. And Martha, she sat in the sun. She read a book about clouds. She became a damn fortress of serenity. Because sacred unavailability isn't about being cold. It's about being selective. You're not rejecting people. You're choosing yourself. You're not abandoning relationships. You're refusing to participate in emotional labor you never signed up for. You're not being selfish. You're being sovereign. From a Buddhist perspective, this is the move from performing compassion to embodying wisdom. You learn that not every knock at the door is an invitation to open up. Sometimes it's just the wind. So here's your permission slip, stamped, signed, and sealed in golden silence. You can ignore the call. You can skip the party. You can leave the message on read. And you don't have to explain. You don't have to justify. You don't even have to lie. You just have to trust that being unavailable for dysfunction is the most enlightened thing you've done all year. Part 7. The Missing Grandma Effect. Vanish and watch them remember you exist. You ever notice how some people don't remember you exist until you disappear? You could raise 5 kids, babysit their kids, cook casseroles with arthritic hands, and never forget a single birthday card. And then one day, you don't text, you don't call, you don't show up at the usual time. Suddenly they're panicking like you joined a cult, or worse, finally found peace. Welcome to the missing grandma effect. It's what happens when the spiritual lighthouse stops shining for everyone lost at sea. Not out of spite, but out of blessed, holy exhaustion. And just like that, the very people who forgot to ask how you were for the last decade are now dialing your number like it's 1999. Mom, you okay? You haven't posted on Facebook in 3 days. Did you see my text? Yes, sweetheart, I saw it. And I ignored it on purpose. Elder psychology has a quiet truth. Sometimes the most powerful move a person can make is to not show up. When you vanish, even a little, the silence creates a vacuum. And in that vacuum, people begin to hear the echo of everything they took for granted. They remember you cooked every holiday meal, even when your sciatica was acting up. They remember your porch was always open, even when your heart wasn't. They remember you. Funny how that works. Now don't mistake this for emotional manipulation. This isn't a revenge plot, this is gravitational wisdom. The moon doesn't chase the tide. It just exists and the ocean responds. You, my dear elder, have been orbiting other people's needs for far too long. It's time you stepped back and watched them recalibrate. Let me tell you about Joni. Joni's 81, wears linen like armor, and one day decided she was going off-grid for a week. She didn't tell anyone, just unplugged her phone, closed the blinds, and binge-watched nature documentaries while sipping wine. By day 2, her daughter, who hadn't visited in 6 months, was driving across state lines. By day 4, the grandkids were leaving voicemail confessions. By day 5, someone mailed her a handwritten apology for something that happened in 1993. All because she disappeared without dying. And when she finally re-emerged, rested and radiant, she didn't say a word. She just smiled and asked, "Did you miss me? Or did you just finally notice I was always there?" That's the Buddhist magic of presence through absence. You don't have to beg for attention. You don't have to remind people you matter. You don't have to overgive, overtalk, or overtry. You just have to step back long enough for your absence to say what your words never could. I am not a given. I am a gift. So the next time you feel forgotten, don't shout. Don't text paragraphs. Don't prove your worth. Just vanish for a while. Go sit in your garden. Listen to birds instead of humans. Let the world notice what it lost when it got used to your free availability. Because sometimes the loudest "I love you" comes from silence followed by "Where have you been?" Part 8. The Art of Being Mysterious. Even if you still live in a retirement condo. Let's face it, predictability is the fastest way to become invisible. If people know exactly what you'll say, what time you'll text, what casserole you'll bring to the potluck, you've become a human notification. Comforting, familiar, and completely taken for granted. Now, I'm not suggesting you start wearing dark sunglasses at night and speaking only in riddles, though honestly, that sounds like fun. But I am saying it's time to reclaim your mystery. Because mystery, my friend, is spiritual charisma. It's what happens when you stop broadcasting your every thought, every feeling, every moment of your day like you're a 24-hour emotional news channel. Let people wonder for once. Leave your phone unanswered. Skip the group dinner. Post a picture of a tree with no caption and see who panics. You're not lying. You're just not available for easy decoding anymore. And why should you be? Buddhist psychology teaches that the self is always changing, like a flame that never holds still. But the modern world demands that we stay knowable at all times. Trackable, explainable, convenient. No mystery, no magic. And when people think they've got you all figured out, they stop really seeing you. They stop asking real questions. They start treating you like a predictable character in their favorite rerun. But here's the secret the elders know. The most interesting people are the ones who stopped explaining themselves. Let me tell you about Walter. Walter is 84, retired Navy, lives in a retirement condo with a suspiciously tidy bonsai tree collection. One day, Walter stopped going to the weekly poker night. No text, no excuse. The guys got nervous. Was he sick? Was he mad? Was he, God forbid, playing cards with a new group? Nope. Walter was at home learning how to play the violin. Poorly, gloriously, mysteriously. He just felt like it. When asked why he didn't say anything, he shrugged and said, "I figured it was none of your business until I got good at it." And just like that, Walter became a legend. Because when you stop broadcasting your every mood and movement, something radical happens. People start treating you with curiosity again. That's the magic of mystery. You don't have to be loud to be memorable. You just have to stop being emotionally Googleable. Here's a practice. Start answering questions with silence, or better yet, with a soft smile. Say things like, "I'm taking some time for myself. I'm trying something new. I'll tell you when it's ready to be shared." People will lean in. They'll wonder. They'll respect your space. Because when you reclaim your inner mystery, you become someone people can't define easily and can't dismiss casually. Not because you're hiding, but because you've realized not everything needs to be explained. Not every moment needs to be shared. Not every part of your life is up for grabs. You are not an open book. You are a sacred scroll, one that unfolds slowly, deliberately, and only for those who've earned the right to read. So go ahead. Miss a few calls, leave a few sentences unfinished. Let your life breathe and watch the world come closer. Not to take from you, but to finally see you. So here's what we've learned, dear soul. You are not a vending machine for comfort. You are not a weather app for everyone's emotional climate. And no, your silence doesn't make you rude. It makes you rare. Today, you remembered that being constantly available isn't love. It's exhaustion with good manners. You don't need to explain your boundaries. You just need to rest in them like a cat in a sunbeam. Quiet, unapologetic, deeply unbothered. Whether it was the sacred power of not replying, the missing grandma effect, or the spiritual economics of emotional bankruptcy, I hope one part of this video stirred something inside you, or at the very least, gave you permission to leave a few texts on read. And if it did, if your peace now feels slightly more non-negotiable, go ahead and tap that like button like it just asked you for one more favor. Leave us a comment if you've ever disappeared quietly and found yourself in the process. And hit subscribe to help us reach our first 1,000 Wise Rebels. That one click gives us the energy to keep showing up. Ironically, by helping you learn how not to. Until next time, be unavailable, be untamed, and above all, be quietly free.